The Archlich, the Undying King, the Whispered One. A human mage turned lich and then ascending to godhood, Vecna is by far, no questions asked, the most popular villain in all of D&D. Whether you're a typical D&D player, a Critical Role fan, or an avid watcher of a popular TV show, your understanding of Vecna may vary. So today, we're going to clear that up with who is Vecna. So, who is Vecna? Well, that's a loaded question. Much of Vecna's life is shrouded in mystery. The only thing we really know for sure about Vecna is that he was a mortal that eventually ascended to godhood. Specifically, the God of Secrets. And that pretty much sums up how this video is going to go. Originally assumed to be a human or a half-elf wizard from the planet of Oerth, probably said that wrong, but Vecna trained for years to master the arcane arts. Growing up, Vecna actually lived with his mother in the city of Fleeth. It is generally agreed upon that Vecna was taught magic, or at least some levels of magic, from his mother, Mazel, who was also a worshipper of the great serpent, Macleod. Probably pronounced that one wrong too, but we'll get to them later. Throughout his mortal life, Vecna trained and became an incredibly powerful wizard, but something eventually happened that changed Vecna's perspective forever. His mother, who taught him pretty much what he knew about magic at the time, was persecuted and burned for being a witch. Vecna was able to escape, however, as you might imagine, he did hold a little bit of a grudge against the city of Fleeth for this. Many speculate that the death of his mother was actually the reason Vecna sought out lichdom. He began to obsess about his own morality, being forced to think about the very real possibility that he could suffer the same fate as her. After the death of his mother, Vecna continued to study and eventually learned about lichdom. The rest of the story from this point on is pretty much rumors. There are three generally agreed upon schools of thought about how Vecna learned of lichdom. Some say that Vecna was taught how to achieve undeath by Orcus, the demon lord of the undead. Others believe that Vecna experimented on hundreds of thousands of innocents until he was finally able to learn and achieve lichdom himself. And some even believe that he was taught by Macleod the Serpent, the very same patron whom his mother served many years ago. While any of these theories are technically possible, I find the possibility of him learning about lichdom from either Orcus or Macleod incredibly interesting, especially considering the stature of these beings. One is a powerful demon lord of undeath who rules his lair of the abyss with an iron fist. The other was said to be a personification of magic itself, a completely mythical being and only really known in legends. And while we don't necessarily know how Vecna achieved lichdom, we do know that he got there in the end anyways. After achieving lichdom, Vecna found himself in the possession of the Book of Vile Darkness, possibly the most evil item in all of Dungeons & Dragons. Although I guess that's not entirely accurate. Up until this point, the Book of Vile Darkness was more like the very large scroll of Vile Darkness. Vecna, once in possession, transcribed all of the knowledge into a bound book made of human flesh and demon bones, bound by magic. Once transcribed, Vecna added his own knowledge to this book and continued his studies. The Book of Vile Darkness has gone on to become an incredibly feared and powerful artifact, said to have sentience enough to adjust its contents based upon its perception of its user, and even has the power to kill the user if it's deemed unworthy by the book. As Vecna became more and more powerful, so too did his empire, and eventually Vecna came face to face with the city of Fleeth, the very same city that chased him out and killed his mother. Vecna marched on the city with his army of undead and actually was nearly destroyed in the battle, surprisingly. Clerics of Foltest, or Pelor, depending upon which source you read, unleashed a giant burst of radiant energy which nearly destroyed Vecna entirely, but he was saved by his longtime apprentice and now lieutenant, Acererak. You may remember Acererak as the main protagonist in the Tomb of Annihilation, or from his time modeling for the cover of the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. Acererak had infernal heritage, and this led to him experiencing, honestly, a nearly identical scenario to Vecna's childhood. As a child, Acererak's house was burned down and attacked by a mob of angry farmers which killed his mother. It's not clear as to why, but Vecna apparently saved the child from the mob and slaughtered anyone who dared harm that kid. I'm not really sure if Vecna was reliving some past trauma, or if it has some other means for doing this, but he ended up taking Acererak under his wing as his half-infernal apprentice. Anyways, Asarak saved Vecna, and this led to Vecna really favoring Asarak and promoting him in his forces. However, it is thought that Asarak actually planned Vecna to nearly die and save him in order to gain favor. Vecna eventually found out about this treachery and kicked Asarak out of his club. Basically, he sent Asarak to go hang out in this nasty swamp really far away from Vecna, where Asarak pretty much constructed the Tomb of Horrors. With the vacancy in the lieutenant position in Vecna's ranks, he eventually promoted a bloodthirsty and brutal paladin named Cass, that eventually went on to become known as Cass the Bloody-Handed. And with this promotion, Vecna rewarded Cass for his loyalty by forging a legendary sword known as the Sword of Cass. After Vecna's recovery with his new lieutenant in place, Vecna sieged the city once again, only this time it was successful. Long story short, Vecna and his lieutenant slaughtered the entire city and began expanding Vecna's empire. Now the time after this gets a little wibbly-wobbly because there's literally hundreds of years in between, but during that downtime, Vecna spent a lot of time plotting and scheming his main goal, which was ascending to godhood. He left behind a bunch of corrupted items, as well as just flat out laid some traps for wizards seeking forbidden knowledge. Any wizard unlucky enough to stumble upon or find this forbidden knowledge were transformed into Nothics, and they were all bound to Vecna. These poor souls all served Vecna through his cults, and even acted as an extension of Vecna himself, being able to see through any of the Nothics' eyes. And all this time, while Vecna was researching and scheming, his empire was growing, and Cass was left in charge of effectively maintenance and overseeing the entire empire, as Vecna was far too busy to deal with anything like that. But honestly, Cass didn't mind. Until he did. You know that sword Vecna created specifically for Cass? Yeah, the Sword of Cass? Well, it's not entirely sure if it was intended, but the sword was sentient and actually spoke to Cass. And it didn't really say nice things. It kept urging him to overthrow his master and take his powers for himself, which Cass eventually attempted. It's said that Vecna, when he finally acquired enough power and magic to ascend to godhood, he then attempted the ritual to do so. But it just so happened that that was the ideal time for Cass to betray his former master. The two fought back and forth, and the fight eventually ended with both of them being physically destroyed. All that was left of Vecna was one hand and one eye. And this is also the origin story for the cursed artifacts, the Hand of Vecna and the Eye of Vecna, both of which are incredibly powerful artifacts said to be infused with the power of Vecna himself. And even with Vecna technically destroyed, both of the artifacts continued to work their way around the world, corrupting those brave enough to seek them out. But as you're likely aware, Vecna wasn't destroyed. In fact, both him and Cass survived, in a way. After their battle, both Vecna and Cass were said to be banished to another plane of existence called the Domains of Dread, and depending upon which cosmology you're following makes the actual location of this plane vary. Some say it's in the Shadowfell, some say they ended up in the ethereal plane. It all changes based upon the edition and the source that you're referring to. But for the sake of the example, they were banished to another remote plane of existence. Simple as that. This area effectively became a war zone between the two opposing forces. Vecna eventually came to rule one domain known as Covidius, and Cass came to rule another domain known as Tovag. These two domains were aptly named the Burning Peaks, and it is there where Vecna remained for quite some time, locked in his eternal quest for vengeance against his greatest betrayer. While this battle in another plane of existence raged on, Vecna continued to grow more and more powerful. Tales of Vecna spread across the realms from whispered rumors of those who feared him. These rumors, coupled with his corrupting magic items that he left behind, gained Vecna a sizable cult following back in the material plane, and eventually Vecna was able to ascend to that of a lesser deity. And this right here is the biggest plot hole, or just not explained plot about Vecna's lore. I scoured the internet trying to find how Vecna was able to achieve this, how he was able to become a lesser deity, but everything about it is shrouded in mystery, making Vecna achieving godhood the best kept secret in D&D. Which is even more frustrating by the fact that Vecna is known as the god of secrets, so I know it makes sense for me to not know why he became a god or how he became a god, but it still pisses me off. Anyways, becoming a lesser deity was great, and Vecna was happy for about 2 minutes, but he wanted more than that. He wasn't happy being simply a deity, he wanted to ascend to that of a greater deity, and he eventually succeeded. his plan to ascend to that of a greater deity involved Ayuz, another demigod who was also searching for a way to ascend to a greater deity. Now, do you remember a little while back, I mentioned that Vecna left traps for wizards seeking forbidden knowledge? Well, one of these traps was said to be an ancient tablet that Vecna left behind, said to hold the knowledge of how to ascend to godhood. The tablet stated that a demigod could absorb power from another demigod if they followed the instructions on the tablet and had another piece of a second demigod that they would absorb power from. Ayuz had heard of both the Hand and the Eye of Vecna and found both artifacts to complete this ritual. The only issue was that these tablets were a trap set by Vecna and actually had the opposite effect to what they said they had. Instead of Ayuz absorbing Vecna's power, Vecna absorbed Ayuz's power, and with that, Vecna, the greater deity of secrets, was born. This gave Vecna power to break free from his prison in the domain of Dread, at which point he went on to attack the city of Sigil, the city of doors, also known as the city of secrets. Hopefully you're picking up on the consistent theme here. Anyways, Sigil was a floating city in the center of the Outlands that was said to have doors leading to every single plane of existence within. Vecna wanted to utilize the city to exert his will across the multiverse, effectively becoming the god of everything. The thing about Sigil was that it was a very safe city and protected from any sort of influence, being a completely true neutral city. Ruled over by an incredibly powerful being known as the Lady of Pain, Sigil was warded and prevented gods from entering. That is until Vecna quite literally punched a hole through its defenses with the excess power from his recent ascension and began his attack on the city. This is the one and only time a deity was actually able to breach Sigil's defenses, which caught the Lady of Pain off guard. This, I believe, is actually the plot of a 2nd edition adventure, Die Vecna Die, so if you're interested you can go check that out. The siege was eventually thwarted by the adventurers in the module, as well as with assistance from the Lady of Pain. In the end, Vecna got separated from Ayuz, thereby removing his greater deity status and reverting Vecna back to a lesser deity. And that's pretty much the history of Vecna as we currently know it. The last thing I want to say about this is that Vecna has been around in D&D for a long time, and actually has a bunch of adventures focused around him. These adventures and their plots all have Vecna as a part of the story and the history, so everything I mentioned in this video was a direct result of each of those adventures in the past being successful. Alongside that, some of Vecna's story changes from additions to settings. You may be aware that he plays a part in the Greyhawk campaign setting, Eberron, Ravenloft, and the Forgotten Realms, and even Critical Role's Exandria. This video is really a culmination of information put together in a way that makes the most sense to create the story of Vecna. So if you have any questions or maybe think I missed something, let me know in the comments below. I would really love to hear what you think about Vecna and if you've ever gotten the chance to run him in some of your games. Also, if you enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate if you liked it and maybe even subscribed if you liked the content enough. I post new videos every Monday and stream our live home game in the world of Asura every Friday at 7:30 PM EST. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you on Friday.